Shalom Uvracha. We are in Mishneh Torah, the Rabbeinu Agadol Rambam, Hilchot Deot Perek Hey. I believe we left off Halacha Yod Aleph. Would that be correct? Talmid Chachamim lo yeh so'ek u'so'eh. I did want to mention briefly a couple of things with regards to what we saw last week. Rambam wrote here in Perek Hey, Chod Deot Halacha. Well, I'm marking it out here. Af al pi she'ishto shel adam mutarat lo tamid, even though a man's wife is muteret, he is allowed to cohabit with her always, as long as she is not in nidah, for example. Ra'ui lo, excuse me, ra'ui lo letamid hachamim she'yanhich asmo b'kedusha v'lo yeh nusui esel ishto ketar nechol. The Temani Nikud pronunciation here is Tur Nechol. Ela milele Shabbat elele Shabbat im yesh bo koach. And this is what we find in the Talmud, that onat tamidei chachamim milele Shabbat, once a week. I wanted to point out that there is room for greater frequency in many cases. In some cases, certainly, even with regards to Talmidei Chachamim. Ha'Gaon HaGadol Rabbi Moshe Feinstein Zatzal writes in a Teshuvah on this subject that he recommends to Talmidei Chachamim twice a week. These are not hard and fast rules, but that is what he writes as a general rule. I won't go into all the details of the discussion right now, but from that fact alone, you see that there are numerous considerations. I will mention here just a couple of considerations. The frequency of marital relations can also affect fertility, particularly in cases where the woman's fertility is somewhat borderline for various reasons. It can make a difference whether the couple is having relations 2 or 3 times a week or once a week. I know this from medical experts as well. That's one consideration. Second of all, we live in a very olam paruth ma'od, a very degenerate world when it comes to all such matters, as we all know, and the temptations and the problems caused by the general lowly level of the world nowadays cannot be ignored. For these reasons, what Moshe Feinstein, for example, suggests twice a week may also be another reason to adopt that approach. I'm also aware from an individual who at one point was part of a Hasidic community in the United States, that the Rebbe and the Posek Halacha of this Hasidic community, without hesitation, recommended to all the Hasidim 3 times a week. I mention these things simply because there is room, depending on the situation, depending on the individual, the couple. There is room for considering these matters and being more amenable to other suggestions, other than the explicit recommendation of Chazal Milale Shabbat, even though that is obviously still the essential recommendation and instruction of Chazal, as we see here in the Rambam. That is one thing I wanted to mention, and therefore, such matters should be discussed with a Hacham, with whom the couple feel a true affinity and connection, and feel that they can speak about these things and be understood and understand the Chacham, what he suggests, based on these various considerations. That is one thing I wanted to mention. The other thing I wanted to touch upon, which we did not mention last week, in Halacha Yod here, Saniuth Gedola Noachim Talmidei Chachamim Ma'asmam. Lo yitbazu v'lo yigalu roshan v'lo gufan. So I have been asked in the past, what does that mean? Lo yitbazu, lo yigalu roshan v'lo gufan. Well, lo yigalu roshan is fairly plain. Even though Rambam does not mention anywhere the chova to wear a kippah, to wear some kind of kisui rosh, some head covering as an halachic requirement, which is simply because there is no such halachic requirement in simple terms, as the Gra also makes clear in his biur on Orahim Siman Het. Nevertheless, we see that Rambam does write here that for Talmidei Chachamim lo yigalu roshan, it is not considered proper that a Talmid Chachamim be seen in public with an uncovered head. Is part of not midin kisui rosh. It's not because there is a requirement to have one's head covered, but it is part of the concept of sni'uth, of covering oneself in general. And that's why it immediately is mentioned here in connection with this, lo yigalu roshan v'lo gufan. So an example of this would be Talmid Chachamim does not wear shorts in public, for example. It may be very hot, and therefore it may be readily understood why he would like to do so. And nevertheless, we do suffer, so to speak, in inverted commas perhaps, but we do suffer. We are willing, and we must be willing to abide by certain standards, even though it is not always convenient, not always easy. It is true for women, and it is true for men also. In the case of a woman might say, it's terribly hot. Can I not wear short sleeves? Well, the answer is, I know that it's hot, and we're also hot. Everyone's hot, perhaps. But the answer is no. That is not a value, not a concept, not a norm that we are willing or able to dispense with. Very well, we shall continue. So we are now in Halacha Yod Aleph. Talmid Chachamim lo yeheh tzorek v'soach b'sha'at diburo kabbehemoth v'chayot v'lo yagmiya kolo biyoter. Talmid Chachamim should not, when speaking with other people, he should not shout and scream tzorek v'soach like wild animals, as some people do. This is unfortunately a type of behavior which is all too common in many places, but I would specifically mention the Middle East. It is part of Arab culture. He who raises his voice loudest is the biggest man, is the most important, and this is just how they work, and that's not a Jewish way, a Jewish form of behavior. It's not acceptable. He should not raise his voice. He should speak in a calm and collected manner with all people. Now, of course, there are situations where one has to make an exception, and one does have to raise one's voice. But hopefully these exceptions are few and far between. And when speaking in this fashion, gently, quietly, there was a practice that was known in the time of Hazar. I think it's less common nowadays, that some people would deliberately speak particularly quietly, were basically whispering. It was an affectation to, as it were, to imply that they're very, very refined and very special people, and they cannot really bear having to communicate with other people at all, and they would whisper, and that was in fact the opposite of anawa or thni'ut. That was in fact the behavior of gaseh haruah, are haughty, arrogant people who are trying to give airs. So Rambam says a person should not behave in that fashion. And one should, when walking down the street, etc., one should greet all people in a positive manner, so that people will have a positive attitude regarding this Talmid Chachamim. They will feel that he is not aloof, does not wish to even acknowledge their existence. We discussed this, I believe, last week also. All these, many of these statements are mentioned in Masechet Avot. A person should speak positively of his fellow man, of his friend, of his colleague, but should not, as we will see in Perek Zayin, discussing Machon Hara, he should not speak ill of anybody. If you cannot say anything positive, or it would be untruthful to say something very positive about a certain person, generally the best thing to do is not to say anything. To this too, there are exceptions. For example, when there are people who because of the opinions they have adopted, their ideology, they are very vocal in expressing certain opinions which are very pernicious, which harm the Jewish people and their basic values. It is not only permitted, it is a mitzvah to speak against such people and point out that what they're saying is completely wrong, misleading, and dangerous. This is also mentioned by the Mishnah Brura by Rabbeinu Hafetz Chaim at the beginning of the Mishnah Brura. You can look it up there and see exactly what it says. Ohev Shalom, Urodef Shalom. So a person's general disposition and aspiration should be to be a Rodef Shalom, to be someone who seeks peace. But again, this is precisely what the Mishnah Brura discusses there. This is not always possible with people who are determined to be at war with you, to be adversarial and to cause strife and to deliberately cause argument and discord. So it's not always up to you. It can also very often can depend on what others are doing. This is also true, but these are the general rules of thumb. Rambam continues, Halacha Yod Beth, or Halacha Zayin, and other editions. Im ra'eh maqam she'devarot mu'ilim u'nishma'im. Omer, v'im lo shotek. If this Talmid Chachamim sees, is aware of a situation where if he says what he believes to be true, what he knows to be true, will be helpful and his words will be accepted, he does and should say what he has to say. V'im lo shotek, but if he knows, or if he feels quite certain that what he has to say will not be accepted, will not be received well, it is often correct, ishtok, not to say anything. Kesal, for example, lo yaraseh el havero b'sha'at ka'aso, when his fellow man, his friend, his colleague, has become particularly incensed by something. He should not try and calm him down when he's in this fit of anger, because it simply is very unlikely to work. That is just the nature of most people, and they needed some time to calm down. So at that point, he should not say anything. Nor should the Chacham, try to be matir, the nether, to undo the nether, the vow that a person took, which is often done b'sha'at kas, when a person is angry for some reason. A person utters a lashon of nether, I will not do this thing, or such and such will not take place in my house, and what have you. These things are often said in anger, and therefore it's not to be discussed with a person until he calms down. Only then can it be discussed rationally. Nor should he attempt to console the bereaved, the person who has just suffered a bereavement, before this relative has even been buried. Because until the burial, the person is not in a state of mind to receive any kind of tanchumim. He's not in a state to be spoken to. He has to be left alone at this point. And this is true for other things that we can all understand and appreciate. Nor should he try and be present. In other words, he should attempt not to be present and not witness his fellow man, his friend, acting improperly. Literally when he is engaging in some sinful activity. He sees what's going on, but it's better that he not be seen, that he, as it were, not be aware, make himself unaware. Why? So that this person will be able to do teshuvah without being overly embarrassed, without being feeling disrespected or on feeling that his honor has been trampled underfoot because people are aware of what he did. It can happen that a person is overcome by some passion or is riled up by something and acts improperly. And if the person himself is a Talmid Chachamim, he will probably understand and be aware of this fact that he slipped up. And he will also do teshuvah. And you should not make yourself scarce at that time. That's what Rambam says. Again, these are all statements, explicit statements of the Chachamim, which the Rambam here has brought together and arranged very beautifully in this parak. Many statements and pieces of advice of Chazal are included in this parak. Furthermore, Rambam says, Halacha Yud Gimel, V'lo yishtana b'diburo, a person should not stray from the truth at all. Whatever he says must be entirely truthful. V'lo yosif, v'lo yichra, he should not embellish the truth nor detract from it. Ela b'divra shalom v'chayoseh b'hen, unless the person is exaggerating, overstating something in order to engender peaceful relations and a positive atmosphere, then it is mutar, b'shvil shalom, and it is mutar l'shanot, it is mutar to be less than completely accurate and truthful in order to engender shalom. כללו של הדבר, אינו מדבר אלא או בגמילות חסדים. So the general rule is that Talmid Chachamim should speak when he has what to say in certain situations, and it should be about the things that to do with Gemilut Hasadim, helping others, doing kindness and assisting others in various ways, or discussing divrei Torah, and Rambam uses the word Chokhmah here, not Torah, and perhaps deliberately, to include things which are maybe not technically not Torah, but they are Chokhmah, and they are positive, they are beneficial. I want to perhaps show you some other source, just a moment. I'll share with you the screen now. This is in Hilchot Gezerah U'Aveda, Perek Yud Daled, at the end of the Perek. We're talking here about finding objects and whether you're required to announce in your neighborhood, in your vicinity, that you have found something, so that a person who may have lost it may identify it by providing some kind of siman, some kind of indication that this thing belongs to him. If he can explain that we're talking about a wallet that looks like this, that had this kind of design on it or something, that is a siman. So, for example, Rambam says here in Halacha Yod Bet or Yod Aleph in other editions, Hamoseh davar she'en bo siman, a person who finds something in the public domain, the street, she'en bo siman, there is no identifying siman, there is no way of proving that it's yours. I mean, it could be, for example, the rule is if there's no siman, you're not hayav la'achriz, you're not required to announce this, because how is the person going to prove that it's his? For example, you found a 100 shekel note. Well, how's it different from any other note? Unless he happens to know the very lengthy number or code that appears on the bill, which is unlikely. There's no way of proving it, so he's not hayav la'achriz, and therefore that is his. But the halacha is hamoseh davar she'en bo siman, b'sav davar sheyesh bo siman. You found two things. One is next to another, and therefore it is likely that they were lost by the same person together at the same time. And one of those two things does have a siman, and it is possible that someone will be able to identify it and prove that it's theirs. Hayav la'achriz. Rambam goes on to say, I'm skipping here a few things. Hamoseh halacha yud gimel, hamoseh kele haras v'chayoseh bahen mikelim shesurat kulam shoah. In other words, you found some kind of object, a household object, and there are plenty of these objects about. Everyone has these things. They all look the same. If we're talking about something which is new, it's obviously just been produced by the yoser. Yoser is the person who produces keleheres, earthenware dishes, but it could be a jar, a pot, or something of that nature. If it's new, well, they all look the same, and there's no way that anyone can provide any siman. Sharehem kamo dinar misha'ara dinarim she'en lo siman wena ba'alim makirim otham. It's like a note of money, a coin. They all look the same. Share eno yodea im pach ze o salahit zo shelo o shelaher. There's no way of knowing if this container or this small bottle, this small, very small jar, salahit, or this glass is his or somebody else's, and therefore it is not necessary, not possible to prove, and it's not necessary therefore la'achriz, to announce. V'im hayu kelim halacha yod daled, v'im hayu kelim yeshanim sheteva'atan ha'ayin. But if is it a dish, is it a pot? It could be an earthenware pot, which may look like many other pots, but it has been used by this person, and it has a certain mark on it for whatever reason. They got a knock. There's a chip, shall we say, on the side of this pot. It got knocked, and a certain small flake of the earthenware material was chipped away at a certain spot, and he can point this out because he knows it. It's his. He's used it. He's seen it many times. Then he's hayav la'achriz. He must announce and give people the opportunity to come forward and prove that it is theirs. She'im yavo talmid hachamim v'yomar af al pi she'eni yachol liten b'chli kazeh siman yesh li bo tevi'ut ayin. This halacha applies only to a talmid chachamim, because only such a person can be trusted implicitly, even though it's not a real siman, but there's a tevi'ut ayin. It's not because there could be many pots with chips. If the person says there's a certain mark on it somewhere, that's not much of a siman. That could be true of many pots. But a Talmid Chachamim may say that I'm familiar with this pot that I lost, or this vessel, and if I see it, I know it's mine. And if it's not mine, I'll tell you it's not mine. The Talmid Chachamim is trusted when it comes to these things, because he will not stray from the truth, even one iota. So if a Talmid Chachamim, a person who's known to be a Talmid Chachamim, comes forward and says, well, I haven't got a real siman that normally would be considered an halachic siman, which means, but I recognize it. So then the person who found this vessel, this item, hayav laharotho lo, he must show it to him. Im hikiro v'amar shelihu mahzarim lo, and if this Talmid Chachamim says, yes, I know, I recognize this is mine, then he has to return it to him. But to another person, he's not required to do so, because he may not be telling the truth. Rambam explains further, "Bama devarim amurim b'tamid wathik she'eno meshane b'diburo kalal." This is not true of any Talmid Chachamim. Even here, we are very particular. We see here a very interesting concept. Talmid wathik, in other words, a person who is wathik implies not necessarily a very young person, a person whose passions are more likely to get the better of him. We're talking about a Talmid Chachamim wathik, someone who is a bit more mature, someone who we have reason to rely completely on what he says. So Rambam says, "Bamed devrim amurim b'tamid wathik she'eno meshane b'diburo kala, ela b'divrei shalom, או במסכתה, או במיטה, או בבית שהוא מתארח בו." And this is Kesad. Rambam now explains this. These are some, of course, again based on explicit statements of the Chachamim, that a Talmid Chachamim does not stray from the truth unless it has to do with one of these kinds of things. Rambam explains, Kesad haya osek b'masechet nida. The person was studying Masechet Nida. وَأَمَا بَمِكْوَثَ أَنِشَنَيْ. But when asked, what Masechet are you learning right now? He says, I'm studying Mikwath, not Nida. Why does he do this? He's not speaking the truth. He does not want to be asked questions regarding Hilchot Nida. For example, he does not wish to posek halacha on such a matter. He understands that if people know that he's studying Masechet Nida, he must be a mavin in this area, so we can ask him this difficult question. He doesn't feel he's ready, shall we say, to be asked such questions. He doesn't want to take upon himself that responsibility. So he is permitted to speak in a manner which is not entirely truthful, in order to avoid that situation. That is called Masechta. That's what I just said a moment ago. B'divrei shalom, or b'masechta, or b'mita, or b'vayit shehu mitarech bo. So this is Masechta. He's allowed to claim that he's right now studying something else. Or, for example, to say, even though he has studied something, to say that I haven't studied that thing, that area, that Masechet, so that people will not ask him such questions. Also, because he doesn't wish to be viewed as a great chacham, when he doesn't feel that would be appropriate. Or sheyashan b'mita zo, u'amar bazo ani yashen. Or a situation where he slept in one bed, but he claims to have slept in another bed. Shema yimaseh sham keri, in case there is some sign of seminal emission or something like that, and that would be embarrassing. He doesn't want to talk about it, and therefore he's allowed to claim otherwise. Or shenit areach eser Shimon, u'amar eser Ruben ani mitareach, and he always asked, at whose home are you staying? And he says, I'm staying with Shimon, but in fact he is being hosted by Reuven. Because he doesn't want to cause Reuven any harm. He doesn't want people to think that anyone who needs a place to stay can always go to Reuven. So he deliberately claimed something else. Or he's he embellished the truth. He didn't speak entirely and precisely truthfully in order to reconcile two people who have been, shall we say, angry with each other, arguing, in order to resolve that situation. All such things are mutar, says Rambam, because Gadol HaShalom, as the Chachamim say, something which is learned, amongst other things, from the Mehika of Shem Hashem in the case of a sotah, where in order to la'asot shalom ben adam le'ishto, it is mutar to blot out the name of Hashem. So Gadol HaShalom, it is mutar therefore also to be not entirely truthful in order to bring about the desired situation of peaceful coexistence and friendly relations. However, if there are witnesses who claim that they know of a case where this person spoke in a manner which was not entirely accurate, and it was not such one of these cases, in that case, he is not considered the kind of Tamid Chachamim to whom one returns a lost object based simply on the fact that he says, I recognize that it's mine. So these statements of Rambam, again, based on explicit statements of the Chachamim, are very, very instructive, I think, in terms of understanding the concept of speaking truthfully and being on, and the value and the importance, the critical importance of honesty. Rambam says further, we got returned to Hilchot Deot Perek Hey. In Halacha Yod Gimel over here, Rambam says, he should not speak to a woman in the street, public thoroughfare, even if this woman is his wife or his daughter or his sister, because not everyone knows that this woman is his daughter or his sister or his wife, and or they may know that his wife, but they do not know this woman is his daughter, and people may suspect that something improper is going on. So mishum mar'it ayin, he should not do so. Rambam continues now. Halacha Yod Dalet. V'lo yehalech tamid chachamim b'choma zakufa v'charon natui. Tamid chachamim does not walk wherever he's going with his head held high, v'charon natui, literally pointed upwards, which is a sign of ga'awa, of arrogance, of haughtiness. As it states in Yeshaya, وَتَلَخْنَا نَطُيُّثْ garon u'mesakaroth عِنَيْنِ. This is a pasuk speaking about women acting improperly, behaving improperly in public, in the way that they conduct themselves, the way they walk, the way they dress in public. And there is speaking, the pasuk says, "V'telachna notuyot garon." They walk with their, literally with their throat, their neck, their head pointed upwards. In other words, mirov ga'awa, because they are trying to make an impression, and because they are not acting in a humble fashion as they should. The same is true for Talmid Chachamim. Nor should a person walk. Again, this is something which I think is not something we are familiar with today. Aqed Basad Gudal literally means the heel next to the toe. In other words, taking very, very small steps. Kamo hanashim v'haseh haruach, as some women do, again, to put on airs, or some arrogant, haughty people do. Again, as we said before, some people were mentioned earlier by Rambam as speaking, whispering, deliberately in order to put on airs. The same is true also in the manner of walking. This should not be done. Kanyan shene'emar haloch v'tafof telachna u'v'raglehen ta'akasna. The same pasuk over there, speaking also about how women are being described there as walking in a provocative and unseemly manner. So clearly, a Talmid Chachamim does not do such things. Furthermore, Rambam says, "Ulo yorus b'reshut harabim." Talmid Chachamim does not run. We inhog b'shigaon, run and act in a wild fashion in the street, in a public place, as some people do. Normal people walk on the footpath, on the sidewalk. They do not run. It is not. It can be dangerous. It's not respectable. Nor should he bend himself over double, like people who have a hunchback. A person should walk with his eyes generally turned downwards, as one does during tefillah, as Rambam mentions in Hilchot tefillah. And walks in a normal fashion, as the normal people who are going about their business do. Gam b'mahalacho shel adam, says Rambam in Hilchot Tet Zayin. Gam b'mahalacho shel adam nikar im hacham ba'al de'ahu or shoteh v'sachar. In other words, we see that the way in which a person conducts themselves, particularly in public, the way they speak, the way they dress, and even the way they walk, can be indications, often clear indications, whether a person is a hacham ba'al de'ah, whether this is a wise man, a man of wisdom, of knowledge, of midoth metukanot, or de'oth metukanot, as Rambam would say. That's what he means here. Ba'al de'ah doesn't mean a ba'al de'ah in the way we use the term today. Ba'al de'ah today would mean a person who is opinionated, or a person who has an opinion, has a very strong position on something. Rambam is talking about de'oth, as we explained before, what we call midoth. So if he's a hacham ba'al de'ah, that is one thing. He will also therefore behave in a certain way. And if he is not, if he's a shotay v'chsachar, he's a fool, a light-headed, empty-headed person who is bereft of all these various influences and impacts and fundamental ideas and notions that the Torah instills in a person, then he is a shoteh v'sachar, and this will also become apparent. And that says Shlomo in his chokhmah, in Kohelet, v'cham b'derech k'shesachar holech libo haser v'amar lakol sachar hu. The way that a person walks, even. The pasuk describes such a person as being, as being a hasar lev, not without a heart literally, but without understanding, without refinement, without understanding, without these various types of midoth, behaviors, and essential understandings that should be the basis of a Talmid Chachamim's behavior and disposition. So a person, just by the way he walks and behaves in the most mundane things, he is essentially announcing to all and sundry that he is empty and foolhardy and without any great content. So we shall stop here for today.
Why is it the case that in the second parak of Hilchot Deot, Rambam speaks about you're being allowed to speak about Divrei Chachma and Dvarim shehu tzarich lehen lahya gufo, and in parak Hey, he only talks about Divrei Chachma and Gemilut HaSovim?
First of all, let us see exactly what Rambam says in parak Sheni. This is in Perek Beth, Halacha Daled, or in other editions. Here Rambam says, this is Halacha Hefa, Halacha Daled. A person should prefer silence over speech, because most people, when they speak, end up saying things that would have been better left unsaid. And if they have any sechel, if they have any understanding, they will often regret what they said, but it's too late. He should speak only about things which have to do with chokhmah, as we said before, wisdom, understanding, useful, helpful ideas, concepts, discussions, all things that he must say in order to conduct himself in this world. So if a person goes to the store and he wishes to know what's the difference between this kind of apple and that kind of apple. All right, well, you have to know the difference in price, the other differences. So you ask. That's perfectly normal and correct. Now, the basic difference is, as I think we've mentioned before, Hilchot Deot is written for all people, but Perek Hamishi is particularly speaking to Talmidei Chachamim. So in this Perek Hey, speaking about Talmidei Chachamim, Rambam specifically mentions more Chokhmah, which is the purview of Talmidei Chachamim, of wise, learned, and disciplined, educated people. Specifically, that is the theme of this Perek, is things which apply more specifically to Talmidei Chachamim. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right. Kol Tov Lachem. Hayu Beruchim. Chizku u'yames levavchem kol ha'meyachalim l'Adonai.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.